Okay, with that, let's bring in Senate Armed Services Committee member Tom Cotton from Arkansas. Senator, good to have you with us. Let's start right there. What did you think of the reaction to the "Are you encouraging China to isolate Russia" question?
Martha, both Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are ruthless dictators who not only repress their own people, but press their own revisionist claims against neighbors. In this case, it's Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine in a naked war of aggression, and Xi Jinping, it's Taiwan. That's why it's so important that we take a firm stance against Russia right now, because Xi Jinping is monitoring what the United States and what our European partners will do. And if we let off Vladimir Putin with a slap of the hand, then he will reason that he can get off even more lightly if he invades Taiwan, a country on the other side of the world of Europe that doesn't have anywhere close to the cultural and historical ties that Ukraine does to Europe. So the sanctions that President Biden announced a couple of days ago were no more than quarter measures, though a step in the right direction finally. Today we got to half measures, but it took an invasion of Ukraine for that. The president needs to bring our European partners along to ban Russia from the international banking payment system known as SWIFT. We need to sanction their oil and gas sector. We need to sanction their minerals and mining sector. But we also have to take other steps at home as well. You know, the president sent up a budget last year for the military that was woefully inadequate, actually below the rate of inflation that he's created. We added in the Congress $25 billion a couple months ago. Obviously, that will have to go up now. And certainly we have to see a complete reversal of President Biden's war on oil and gas production in America. As Jerry just said, if we were producing more oil and gas here in America, not only would we be energy independent, but we could supply the needs of much of Europe to help reduce the leverage that Russia has over them.
I would imagine that the president would get a lot of support from the moderates that he has lost support from if he made those decisions. If he opened up Keystone and said, look, we're in an extraordinary moment right now. We're going to alter our policy. We have obvious concerns about fossil fuels because that's what he said in the past. But this moment merits us to be independent. I would venture to guess that he would improve his numbers with many of those voters that he has lost. I want to ask you a military question as well here, because the president announced that 7,000 troops will go to Germany. We've obviously bulked up our presence in the NATO countries. What do you think happens next, and what kind of impact can we have by doing that?
Well, Martha, as a temporary measure to help reassure our NATO partners like Poland and Hungary on the eastern flank of NATO, these are not inappropriate. However, in the long term, we cannot continue to commit more combat troops to Europe when we're trying to counteract China's aggression in the Western Pacific. We need our European NATO partners, especially large, wealthy nations like Germany, to start carrying their share of the load. Europe has more than 10 times the economy that Russia does. They are more than capable of spending on their military in a way that will deter Russia from future conflict. They haven't been doing that for 30 years, but it's time for them to care as much about European security as Americans care about it. In the long term, we cannot afford to increase our military footprint in Europe at a time where it has to increase in the Western Pacific. We have to push European NATO partners to do a lot more than they have.
Well, I would imagine that Vladimir Putin has calculated that in. Do you think, as you sit here today, that Putin will be in control of Ukraine? And how long do you think it will take for that to happen?
Well, unfortunately, what you've seen in the first 12 hours or so of this unprovoked attack against Ukraine is the loss of Ukraine's air force and the loss of their air defenses. That means that Russia now has air superiority over Ukraine's ground forces. So I expect they will put up a valiant effort. But ultimately, Russia's military is so much larger and more powerful that Vladimir Putin can do what he's been planning to do all along, which is go for the jugular. We should continue to provide the Ukrainian military with as much military intelligence as we can, to the extent that it's safe for our troops. We should try to provide them with resupply of ammunition and weapons. But right now, Vladimir Putin, unfortunately, has the initiative in Ukraine, which is where we've been for months.
Senator Tom Cotton, we understand that senators will receive a briefing at 5 o'clock today, an unclassified briefing at 5 o'clock, and that next week there will be unclassified briefings, or classified briefings, I should say, once everybody is back on the Hill. Thank you very much, Senator. Look forward to hearing from you on what you're hearing there.